Welcome to Just the Facts, part 2 of our discussion with Miss Lyndsey. Thank you for coming back.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
We appreciate it. You know, in our last episode, we had talked about what customers expect today. Well, we want to continue that conversation going into our sales and service departments and the partnership that's really required today for what consumers expect. So, Lyndsey, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you being here,
yes,
right?
Sir.
It's never a bad thing to come to Vegas, right? You end up here quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
You know, on our last episode, we were talking about in general.
Yes.
What consumers expect, right? We talked about the manufacturers a little bit, getting into changing their CPO programs and so forth. You know, it's been a proverbial, long-standing challenge in the dealerships world for service and sales to work together, right? It's just not the way it's been. It's not been the way of tradition. You know, truth is what it is. If you put a mechanic and a salesperson and personality charts, it'd be the opposite end of the scale.
Absolutely.
Right?
They usually are.
They usually are. And then, you know, the truth is, everyone on this call understands dealers traditionally have driven pay plans, which doesn't necessarily make them work in harmony, right?
Yes.
So let's go there.
So I think, you know, as you look at pay plans and stuff, I was on a panel this morning and one of the dealers was talking about it. These are traditional pay plans. These pay plans were implemented back, 15, 20 years ago and haven't changed. And even after, the inventory changes and stuff, both from the sales and service perspective, most of the pay plans are still the same.
Right.
So, she had mentioned that, you've got salespeople that the parking lot has changed for the employees that are actually coming in. Right. So, but, really talking about the core of what we're continuing to discuss today is both that sales and service interaction. Traditionally, we see it from both the manufacturer side and the dealer side and really the consumer side. Right? We see that there are separate silos in each and every organization.
Right.
So our parts department is completely different than our service department, quite frankly, which they should be working together.
You would think.
Yeah. Our service department is different than our sales department. And so we have created this culture of just allowing independence across multiple parts of the organization. And I think what we're seeing, and picking up where we were last time, is the overall customer experience.
Yeah.
And is that your customers are going to demand a more unified approach, number one. Number two, the employees are also going to expect it.
No,
right?
That's true. Yes.
And I think it's on us as leaders in this industry and in this business, just try to start influencing and putting the pieces of the puzzle together the way it should be. And what I mean by that is, you look at the original when a customer purchases their first vehicle.
Yep.
And once they purchase that first vehicle, it's then handed over to, come here for your first maintenance. And then everybody gets the same communication depending on where they are. And we're still guesstimating time and mileage on vehicles, right? Where the reality is there's so many ways that we can be way more precise on that. And I think a lot of these programs from a service side were implemented back in, 15, 20 years ago.
You're being nice.
Yeah, and really haven't changed, and I think we have to change. We've got to. We talked a little bit about direct mail and, how that works and stuff last time. Direct mail still works. We still need to have our offline and online communication methods to these particular consumers.
You know, it's interesting because on the sales side, we always talk about the proverbial 10-step sales process, right? That was taught to people in the 80s by someone that got taught that in the 60s, by someone that probably got taught that in the 50s, right? And sometimes as a dealer, we just don't get rid of stuff, right? It's what we know. It's what we do.
Creature habit,
yeah. Right? And it was all about controlling your salespeople. Yeah. That 10-step had nothing to do with the consumer. We just wanted to know that the salespeople were doing everything they were supposed to do. And you literally gave them 10 things to follow, right? Well, it's not a whole lot different in service.
No.
The consumers say they don't want to go to the dealer service because they don't want to be told they're supposed to spend a lot more than they intended to spend. They don't want to be walked around their car and told everything that's wrong with it. That's their baby, and you keep throwing rocks at it, right? So It's a difficult thing we're talking about.
Yeah.
If we have the same people, which you should, no one's encouraged you to change your people, right? But times change.
Yeah, and I think perception is reality.
It is.
And what you just said kind of hit something with me is that, consumers don't necessarily, their first call isn't to the dealership. And usually it's because of price.
It is.
And they assume that price is more and the price is higher to take your car in for service at the dealership, when in all reality, that's not the case.
In most cases, the dealer's losing money on those tires and some of those oil changes, right? But
absolutely. And I also think, when you talk about it, or when we talk about, perception being reality, we also have to change with the times, right?
Yeah.
These we have to communicate better from a staffing perspective.
Right.
And like the importance of, hey, once this customer buys the car, we need to keep them in service. Why? Because they're 7 times more likely to purchase another vehicle from us if we keep them here.
Right.
So we need to start defining audiences and looking at customers from active loss to conquest, making sure that we have a different message for each audience to get these customers coming back in. Because I think overall, and with this changing market, loyalty is going to be an issue. It is an issue right now because people are just buying where it's convenient, but it's going to come back. Like, we need loyalty.
Yeah. When the millennial generation, when it was known they were going to take over the buying market, right? Mm-hmm. Back in my dealer days, we were asked, what do you think's going to happen? And no one has a crystal ball, and everyone's guessing.
Yes, sir.
Educated guessing, but they're still guessing.
Sure. But
some of the things the millennials told us way back then was they don't care the way their parents did. They don't care what car they drive. They don't care what color it is. They don't care about until they made money. Once they made money, then they did care.
Absolutely.
Then it did matter. Then they did want to go to the dealership. Hyundai just released a study that said 95% of their transactions still took place at the dealership, right? So the consumer did all the research like we know they did. They used all the media channels like we know they do. But when it came down to it, because it's such an emotional purchase, you reference to it once in a while too. It's the second largest.
Yeah.
But it's a big deal. Like buying a car is a moment in a lifetime. Mm-hmm. You like I've spoken to an audience of 1,000 before, and doesn't matter their age. When I make them close their eyes and think back to the first car they bought themselves, not the one that they were given or their first whatever, the one that they bought for themselves, the first, they can remember it as soon as, because that's a moment in a lifetime. And that's part of what we're losing. That's part of what's becoming too stale, too cold, too calculated, right? So in order to have the ultimate customer experience, it not only has to be online, right? Without that, you don't have a chance. We all know that. But we can't drop the ball when we finally get them to the dealership, right? Like, here's the truth. According to NADA, 9 out of 10 consumers go online before meeting a dealer. They spend an average of 14 hours doing research, which means 90% of your consumers come in your dealership are at least 90% ready to buy. You showed them 27 photos. You told them everything about the car. They probably came with a history report, so you know everything about the car.
They know more than the salesperson.
They do, and it's priced to market.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot left for them to, right? So if they showed up, they're at least 90% ready to buy a car. But yet then NADA says it's still 35% closing. So how do we go? What happened on the way to the parade where 90% ready to buy 90% of the time and we close them at 35%?
Yeah, what happened on the way to the parade? I'm sure there's a ton that we can unpack there for sure. But I think, at the end of the day, people still like buying from people.
Right.
And how you treat a customer when they walk through the door is different. And, again, going off of this morning in the panel, dealers are like, we don't need any more leads right now. We need inventory and we need buyers for those vehicles, right? Like, don't send me all these leads, change with the market, because we don't have anything to sell at the end of the day. So when either they do have something or you have the ability to order a vehicle, they're going to want to do it with someone they want to do it with, and somebody that takes the friction out of it. Not only somebody, something. Like, so if the friction is taken out of it online, they might do it online, right? But in going back, there's still something about the personal interaction, I think, from the dealership and from the personnel at the dealership, and that can be very, very successful and take those closing rates higher.
It's still the feel of the wheel, right? It's still the thrill of this one's mine, or I want this one. And again, as dealers, right? As dealers, the hardest thing it is for us to do is to remember what it's like to be a consumer, right?
Absolutely.
To us, they're just stock numbers. That one doesn't even have all the equipment. That one's the wrong color. That one. But to a consumer, right? To a consumer, that's still the thrill. So the experience within a dealership, you can market all you want. You can advertise all you want. You can take pretty pictures. You can do nice advertising. You can have a logo, a mascot, and a slogan. But when a consumer walks in that dealership, they can feel.
How do you make them feel?
They can feel the truth regardless of what you told them to get them there.
Absolutely. And I think it's the authenticity at the dealerships. I'm coming off of our customer advisory board as well. And we had our board rate the order of importance on different things that are going on today. And the least of their worries, honestly, is cutting expense to where we're all like, oh, okay. But the most important thing for them right now is sourcing used cars. Right. So we talked about that, but also overall customer experience. And so customer experience, again, start to finish is in anything in between means that we have to meet the customers where they are. Some and all are really dictating more of that personalized experience based on what we shared in our last session.
Yeah. You know, when we talk about the sales and service connection, right? We know, and most people on this call completely understand, and there's no argument that if you make a customer loyal by having them come back and do all their regular service and maintenance, you know, Toyota says they become 86% repeat purchase.
Absolutely.
Which is amazing because they have a 61% repeat in general, right? So to be at 86, that's the highest in the industry. And we also know that service and sales partnership would provide service with customers because we can send them our best customer, which already has rapport with the dealership, which bought a car here, so like doing business here. So it's a mutual partnership, right? But when it comes to the experience, like if you're a dealer's best customer, Lyndsey buys all her cars here, her family has for 3 generations, she always comes here. As a matter of fact, Lyndsey's my best customer because she uses my service department and buys her floor mats from us too. Well, when you bought the new car, you met with certain personnel at the dealership who use certain tools and certain follow-up. Then when you went to service,
completely different.
You met different people who use different tools, who talked a different language, and followed up with you different. When you went to the parts department,
never gave me a warm handoff.
Never gave you anything.
No.
You went to the parts department, met different people using different tools. And if you go back to buy a used car, sometimes you end up with different people, different tools, maybe a different building.
Yeah.
So you're the quintessential customer that every dealer's looking for. The loyal, does business here, wouldn't dream of going anywhere else. And even your experience is not that good when you look at it each time you touch that store. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think, Lexus, you had mentioned Toyota.
Yeah.
As a Lexus owner years ago, they did it right. I loved going into Lexus because I knew the experience I was going to get every single time.
Before you got there.
Yeah. And today, when I travel, I go to the same spot, get my same food, we're all kind of built a little bit of as creatures of habit.
Yeah.
But I think we want to know what that experience is. And we want to know that there is a warm handoff. And, this is a person I bought from. Well, I want to rebuy from that person if I like that person.
Right.
But everything there in between really does matter, And I think as simple as we can say it is, again, we're in a people business.
Right.
Adapt to the person, but also make sure there's consistency. And the consistency starts with the initial interaction all the way through till the customer buys again.
Yeah, you mentioned handoff, and there's different opinions and different ways to do that. But part of that comes from the comfort level between the two departments, right? Mm-hmm. Like if I'm a salesperson and I make my living off of selling and retaining my customers, and every time I walk back in the service department, I don't get treated that well.
Yeah.
Every time I walk back there, I hear them yelling at each other or having a not so good interaction with a customer, I'm not in a hurry to hand my customer off to someone back there.
I get that. Like, I absolutely get that. But I think in order for that salesperson to get that customer back to buy their next car, and you call it 18 months, 24 months,
Right.
36 months, whenever it is, right? We have to do that. I also think, though, there's an element of culture in what you just said.
Yeah.
And so if the service department is constantly yelling at each other and, providing a different type of feeling,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I can understand the resistance from a salesperson to turn that over. I would also say, though, on the opposite side, so you've got this customer purchased, is consistently servicing with us, or it might have been lost. We made these customers active. What I'm seeing is more and more, and we've done this for years, but I'm seeing more of that handoff from service back to sales.
Not being good.
No, actually quite the opposite. So
Nice.
a lot of these
I don't
dealerships,
usually hear that, as you can tell.
a lot of these dealerships are putting in like VIP managers.
Exactly.
And those people are not really salespeople, right? They are, hey, you just spent $1,300 on your vehicle. You and I talked about it in our little briefing session. These, especially the younger generation, they want to know what is it going to cost me to maintain this car?
Future cost.
You're right, future cost, right? And so if that's the case, how do we take that concern and get them back into a new car? Well, service is also scared to pass it back to sales because they're just afraid that the sales department might rip someone's heads off, right? Well, we have to have that person that's trustworthy, that works with the service team, that works with the sales team as well, to take the overall customer and put the customer back into a car.
So I'm gonna throw you a softball. We'll see how you hit it.
Oh boy, all right.
Here at Just the Facts, we try to be as casual but as straightforward as we can be.
Okay.
Right now, you work a lot of manufacturers and dealership groups and so forth. What's the one or two pain points that are blatantly obvious that you would like to discuss that a dealer could improve on? Now, we don't know who's listening, so we're not throwing rocks at anyone particular. But in your experience, what have you seen, which should be a no-brainer, but you still run into it once in a while, right? Because it's hard in the dealership to see outside. You're always locked into your dealership, right? So what would you add to that? What are one or two things that should be a no-brainer? Maybe it touches a nerve here and there, but if we're not challenging them, we're wasting their time, right?
Communication.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because, I had a really great dealer friend of mine that said, hey, we're not communicating with the overall vision of our organization. We allow our service director to communicate just their area of responsibility with service. We allow our sales team or our GSM or our GM to just focus on the sales side of the business. Parts, they've got their, ball that they're chasing down the field too. Well, the reality is none of these come together. So my one thing that I think is probably easier said than done is to have a company town hall or have an overall company vision of what we are focused on. The reality is, in this ever-changing market, service is continuing to thrive, right?
Right.
And so we need our service department as much as we need the sales department. The other thing I think we need to focus on is, if a customer has bought from you in the past, and as you referenced, if I've bought 3 vehicles from this particular dealership, usually you still don't know who I am.
Right.
And as a consumer, when we're making big purchases, anywhere from $30,000 to $100,000 or more in many cases, I know I want to be treated like you know me.
It's funny. I still have the privilege of visiting dealers almost weekly. Mm-hmm. And to watch a customer walk in and the salesman goes, "How did you hear about us?" And they go, "Well, I bought my last 4 vehicles here." That should not be allowed to happen. Now, I don't know the answers.
Yeah.
But that's to that customer who is loyal and comes back and buys all their vehicles.
But isn't that why we have CRM systems?
That's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. So again, I think, you had referenced Google. Wow me everywhere.
Right.
Don't just wow me online. Wow me when I get to the store.
Yeah.
Wow me in service. Wow me when I buy my next car. Quit asking me for information, and let me show you that I know who you are, that I know what you're in, and that I know what you need.
Yeah.
I think that's key.
You know, in the industry, they reference to it as the art of liquidity, right? Does your showroom, your bricks and mortar, feel like your online showroom, whether that's service or sales or whatever it might be, right? We give the consumer everything they need, however they want it, as best we can online. But when they get to our bricks and mortar, there's a sales process, there's a service process, there's a service lane, there's a salesperson, there's a turnover, there's a say hello to the manager because he cares, and let me walk around your car before we give you what you came. That's not what you did online.
No. But I would also say, is that real too? You know, you think about the online experience, and I mean, back when I started in the car business, we had the gorillas out advertising specific payments. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like, and then you get in there, and it was, well, that payment's not the same, right? And I still think we have an element of that today, is that, hey, the payment that I saw when I clicked on the Google ad doesn't match my website, doesn't match when I start going down the purchase funnel, which is not good either.
Brings up an interesting question, and we'll sum it up with this. When a dealership puts on their webpage, call for your best price. I was going to say,
call for price. I know this is where this is going.
Or call for our service specials, or somewhere along the line on the internet, it says, you know, fill this form out to get your best price. And doesn't that set up?
We lose them.
We lose them.
We lose the customer 100%.
I'm glad I asked you that question.
We lose the customers, you know, because everybody else is giving them the price. Again, I can order on Starbucks. I know that my latte is going to cost me $5.75. There's no surprises. None. You know, I know what I'm buying on Amazon. I know how much it's going to cost. I know when I trade my iPhone in what it's going to cost. And so it doesn't matter what generation we're looking at. We're looking at the younger generation. We're looking at the, you know, baby boomers. We're looking at anything in between, right? When I am up at night at midnight searching for something, I want you to answer.
Yeah.
I don't want to call for price.
Right.
You know, I want you to tell me.
Not going to call for price.
No, nobody's going to call for price these days. And I know that's an area of controversy.
Yeah.
For sure. Because that is the old school way of thinking.
Yeah.
Hey, get him on the phone. I'll get him here. Trust me. We'll set the appointment. Yeah. Once I get the appointment, I'm going to get him in here, and then I'm going to sell my car.
Right. Just get him here.
It doesn't work today.
And it's expensive.
It's expensive, and it doesn't work that way. And I think that we have got to change that. No more call for price, right? We've got to give the customers a price. Otherwise, we're going to lose the business. It's plain and simple.
One last topic before we close today. Setting up service from your new car buyers is the best possible scenario, right? Mm-hmm. We know that if you make them a regular service customer, again, we talked about earlier, it's 86%. We know their repeat is, but not only that, but the vehicle they trade in all of a sudden is your best inventory. Yes. It's what we call homegrown.
Yes.
Right? Bought here new. We took care of it. It got traded back in. Now it's for sale. That car doesn't last a weekend.
No, nothing's wrong with it.
Yeah. So when you look at it from that perspective, right? There's such a gain for doing that, both from the consumer. If you just look at it purely from a consumer's point of view, if the experience is better, the communication's better, it's more consistent, they would be happy to pay more for a better experience. Anytime you let them say what something's worth, it's more than we're asking.
You're right.
Every time.
Right.
So how, if it's possible to sum it up, let's say in a minute or two, how does a dealer achieve that? How, I know your company has a lot of communications and different things you can put out there. What are the one or two things a dealer could do who's listening to us today to improve that customer experience, to make it a more consistent feel? Is there one or two things that you can think of that maybe are low-hanging fruit they could look at? Yeah,
so I think it's consistency across all of the mediums.
Okay.
Right? So that means, and I probably have said this 5 times today, but it's literally making sure the price matches. Because once the price doesn't match, You're losing the trust.
Yeah, there's questions.
And people already don't like the car buying process.
Right.
Okay? So they don't like the car buying process. So if the pricing is consistent from beginning to end, conversion is going to be higher. Sales are going to be higher, right? And then you talk about taking that customer from sales to service. The service experience should also be in line with where the customer is. And I think in some sense, we're doing a better job of getting customers in for their first service. Depending on the manufacturer, numbers are drastically different.
Yeah.
But, you know, if I'm giving you your first oil change and maintenance at this dealership, customer's probably likely to do that for the most part. Right? And then lastly, I would say is how are we taking, again, that customer back from service and putting them back in the sales cycle?
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that because some manufacturers are as high as a 90% conversion for first service.
Yes.
But when it gets to 5, they drop below 60.
It's usually what happens. It's not just some. That's absolutely usually what happens. It drops drastically as the mileage starts to increase. The loyalty starts to decrease.
Right.
And so when that happens, you know, what are we doing? And that is when I believe we need to get more aggressive in getting these customers back, whether it's a free oil change, whether it's, you know, whatever it is, you know, we need to get those customers back in.
That's why they started stocking tires, because that was the biggest defection point, right?
Absolutely.
As soon as the customer needed tires, they didn't come back.
Yeah.
Interesting conversation. Always enjoyable with you, Lyndsey. We're so glad you came by today. Again, I know maybe people know by now, but would you just take a minute if they want to reach out to Team Velocity in your company? How do they do that?
Absolutely. If you want to reach out to Team Velocity, please go to info@Team Velocity Marketing. Send an email to info@teamvelocitymarketing.com. Additionally, you can visit us at any of our social media channels. Just, you know, Google Team Velocity, you will find us for sure. And we are here to serve you. We're here to help you. We are here to partner with you. And overall, you know, our goal is to be able to help you in this ever-changing world that we live in, but also just be able to partner with you to be able to sell and service more vehicles.
Well, Lyndsey, thank you very much for joining us again in this 2-part experience, right?
Thanks for having me.
I always enjoy talking to you. You bring a certain perspective to the program, which we certainly enjoy, and thank you for your time. For all of you out there, thank you for watching us today. We'll see you next time on Just the Facts.